Hello and hello everyone, my name is Lucy and welcome to Books and Brushes. So the October wrap up. I'm a bit late in getting this one out. Let's just film this video because I read some really great books in October, lots of spooky things. I only read 5, but what can you do? Let's get straight into the first book. Wow, it feels like forever ago since I read some of these. So the first book I read was Heartstream by Tom Pollock. I really enjoyed this book. So I've decided to do this little segment in my wrap-ups now where I'm going to give you just the vibe summary. So for those of you who don't want to know any plot whatsoever, skip where I talk about the plot, details that happened, and then just hear my overall thoughts at the end. If you don't want to know anything and you like going into mysteries with no plot at all, then I'm doing little vibe summaries for you because I love you. Yes, I'm looking at you, Connor. So the vibe summary: social media, fame, obsession, tense, suicide bombers and hostages, futuristic contemporary, and heartbreaking tragic backstories. So if that sounds good to you, I highly recommend this book. And if you don't want to know anything more about the plot, you can skip to this little point over here. But if you do want to know what this was about, let me tell you. This is set in a slightly futuristic contemporary where you have an app that you can share your emotions and your feelings. And we have our main character who broadcasted all of the feelings during her mum's illness and her eventual death. A lot of heavy emotional feelings, and she shared this with a huge audience and gained a massive following and kind of became social media famous on Heartstream. And of the day of her mother's funeral, she comes back home to find a bomber in her kitchen and the whole house is rigged to explode, and she's going to have a very long chat with our main character, and she's been waiting to talk to her for a long time. And it was such a good book. Yeah, it had that slightly futuristic element of the Heartstream app, but it was very contemporary, and just the social media vibe of it felt very now and contemporary, even though that isn't a technology we have. This book was very tense. It started off pretty contemporary, a bit, oh no, what's going on? But the tension really ramps up, and the more and more the book goes on, oh my god, the more it gets better and better. It got so good. There's also a couple of different perspectives. The second perspective was fun and different and totally aside from what was going on, but it really related to what was happening with our main character and the whole mystery when it all kind of came together and I found out what was really happening. It was such a good reveal moment. Probably should have seen it coming. You probably could work it out if you were super detective big brain, but I'm not super detective big brain, so I didn't see it, and it was a really great way of connecting it all. And I don't want to reveal too much and give anything away, but there is a specific story and it's so tragic. It's full of desperation, insanity, unfair. Those are the most tragic backstories. It talked a lot about female issues considering it was written by a man, which did weird me out a bit at the time. There was a lot of talk of downgrading women, the whole oh she's insane trope. I don't want to talk about the issues because I don't want to spoil anything, but there was a lot of feminine issues in this book that were brilliantly highlighted. Although, like I said, it was a bit weird reading this book a man wrote about these feminine issues. Well done for getting into the perspective of a woman and presenting these feminine issues very well, so I can't argue it. But I know a lot of people get weirded out when a man mansplains female issues, so if that's the thing for you, just beware that is a thing. But he does explain it very well. What am I even saying anymore? Like I said, the tension, it built up and it got so dramatic and so intense. The characters were so interesting and very well developed, and I loved where it went. It was a little bit slow to start, but oh my god, by the end I was hyperventilating. My biggest gripe with this book though, because I did enjoy it and I loved it, but I do have a moan fest about to happen. The ending. Okay, so imagine I'm on the last page. I am on the edge of my seat dying. Oh my god, are they going to make it through this? What the hell is going to happen? How is she going to get out of this? The tension is at all-time high. I have now my emotional feelings fully embedded into these characters. I want them to win and I don't think they can. How are they going to make it through this? What is going to happen? The end. It ends so abruptly, literally. I was convinced I was missing the last few chapters. That's it? Where's the rest? I was so pissed off. It was so intense, this ending, like what was going to happen. It was the final showdown. And that was it, and it ended. And it didn't conclude, like there was no ending. No, it's so annoying. It's like, I don't mind it when books leave the ambiguous endings for you to kind of figure out what happens on your own. Sometimes books, it's fun to invent your own endings, it's a bit mysterious, but this was just full on, didn't end. I wanted to know, like, were they gonna make it out? How were they gonna get around this issue? I was just so fully pissed off. The author did such a good job of getting me invested in these characters and their story, and then then it didn't finish, and that was really annoying. I just want to know, did they make it? I will never know, and that's really frustrating, and I was very pissed off at the time. Overall, I look back on it, I did really enjoy it, and it was a very good book despite the end, but that is a thing to be aware of, and that is important in my review. I just wish it had ended. There was no satisfaction in the end, no payoff, and it got you right to the cliff, very Italian job, hanging over the edge, and then nothing happens. And this is a standalone. That's just not good enough. I needed the ending, but I still think it was a great book, and if you don't mind that, or you think, oh well, I'll do it anyway because I want to get through the good story, and it is a really good story, I do recommend it. Can you deal with that ending? Can you deal with endings that are so abrupt that it just stop? Let me know. I'm sorry if my voice is going already. I am very ill and I had to film a video. I'm trying my best. Probably why I look like death. Anyway, it is Halloween. It was the spooky month, so it fits the vibe, I guess. The next book I read in October was one I wasn't sure about. That was The Institute by Stephen King. A bit of backstory on my Stephen King journey. So I have never really been interested in Stephen King. I've never felt the inclination. I remember when I started getting into reading when I was about 15 or 16, and my mum gave me her favourite Stephen King book, and that was Needful Things. It's not one of his most popular ones, but it was her all-time favourite, and since I was starting to get into reading, she got really excited and gave me Needful Things. Obviously I gave that back to her. Needful Things, I hated it. I didn't get through it. I don't remember how far I got in, but I definitely DNF'd it, and I didn't understand a word I read. It was so boring, so dull. I think I read 50 pages and thought, I couldn't tell you a single thing about this book. It was so dull, and I don't know if that was just because I was a pea-brained 15-year-old twat who couldn't comprehend it, or was it just bad? Who knows? I don't think I'll go back and reread it. But I've never had the inclination to read Stephen King after that, and I'm not massive into horror, I'm not massive into that kind of style. Never wanted to. But this came out, was it last year? And someone bought me this as a gift for my birthday last year. The description did sound really good, so I was fully on board and excited to get to this because the synopsis, even though the author is super famous but I have no interest in, the synopsis sounded great, and I loved it. I absolutely loved this book. The Vibe Summary. Mysterious government facilities, paranormal and experiments, cruel adults and paranormal children, creepy, unnerving, chilling setting, desperation and escape. That is the Vibe Summary. So if you don't want to know any of the plot and those themes sound good to you, you can skip to here. But if you do want to know, so this book is about Luke, a child prodigy who one night this mysterious group of adults come, murder his parents and steal him away to the Institute, a strange facility with these kids in who all have telekinesis or telepathy, and he wakes up in a room that is exactly like his bedroom except with no window, and they've like remodeled it to look like his room from home, and it's just creepy vibes all round. And he meets these other kids in this facility who tell him what's up, that they've just been kidnapped and they're in this facility. Just go along with what they say because complying is not an option, and you better make it easier for yourself because these adults can be very cruel. And the kids explain that this is front half and you don't even want to know what happens when you go into back half, because the kids that go into the back half, they don't come out. It's a fate worse than death. Oh my god, it is so good. This facility they are in is so creepy. The vibes, the way it was written, it was smooth as butter to read. I was interested and hooked from page one. I loved this story. This ominous vibe. Some of the things that were happening in this facility, ew. It's not horrific the whole way through, but there are definitely moments that were chilling. There's this one moment in particular that I won't mention because it's near the end, but my spine, ew. But it's so easy to read. The style of writing was so smooth to read. I was flying through these pages. Being in this facility, you could feel the desperation for these kids. How when you've got no choice, you'll just comply. You know, how long will it take you to get used to the horrific? And I loved that, the way it was written. The characters were great. I loved so many of the characters and the way they interacted with each other. I read one review after I finished this saying they spent too long in the facility and like there was no big escape nearer the beginning. And I was like, no, I like that we spent time in the facility. That was interesting to know, to feel being in that place and how desperate and just sad it was to see these kids get used to it, to see the cruelty that these adults were putting on these children and the unfairness of it all. I loved it. And it was nice that they didn't escape immediately, because that would have proved that it was easy, you know. It was not a good situation, almost impossible to get out. Can they do what's never been done and escape the Institute? I absolutely love this. You know when you're reading a book and you're just enjoying it so much, you can't wait to get back to it, like, oh, I'm gonna go eat dinner dinner and then I can't wait to come back and read this. And then getting near the end, you're like, oh my god, I can't wait to find out what happens. But also, I don't want to finish it because then it'll be over and I'm enjoying it so much. That's how you know you're reading a great book, that you're just enjoying and you don't want it to end. And I was very sad when this book ended because I just enjoyed my time with it so much. I did not expect this from a Stephen King novel. I really didn't. I thought his writing would be a lot denser. I don't know if it was just the style of this book in particular. I loved it. I loved the characters. I loved the plot. I loved how dark and desperate and depraved it was. You feel for these characters so bad. I almost want to reread this just because I had so much fun. Obviously, I probably won't reread it straight away. I'll give it a bit of time. If you're a bit, I'm not sure if Stephen King's for me, maybe give this one a go because I was really surprised. I really enjoyed it. It was probably my favourite of the month, maybe. The next one was actually a audiobook I listened to while I was doing some work, so I didn't read it physically even though I own it physically. And that is The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. Classics are not my jam. Let's get that out there straight away. I don't tend to do well with classics. I just don't like how awful it is to trudge through old English. I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, for example. Hated it. Loved the idea, the themes. It was so intelligently written for its time. It was miraculous, and from that author. At 19, I still can't get over she wrote that. I still hated it because it was filled with so much filler. This was a slightly different story. It's more of a novella. It's very short. I think the audiobook was only an hour or two. And although the writing was very intelligent, statesmanly, and complex, it wasn't as filled with the filler that other classics are. It got to the point to the story right from the off. There was no faffing around. And because of its brevity and its directness, the language was easier to understand. The story was more comprehensible. The Vibe Summary. A spooky, mysterious story about good versus evil, the duality of man. Very gentlemanly, but also wicked and dastardly. So the plot, you probably already know because it is a classic, but it is about a man who has two sides. There is Dr. Jekyll, the gentlemanly, about town, respected doctor, and his friend Mr. Hyde, the wicked, murderous monster of a man. I do really want to go back and re-listen to it because I feel like I wasn't paying 100% attention because I was working. I did listen to this book probably twice because the amount of times I kept rewinding because I wasn't paying attention to what was happening. I don't know what would be like to read physically. I kind of want to know, would it hold my attention better if I was reading it physically, or would it just be a slog to get through? The story I kind of knew from this book because obviously it's classic, everyone knows what it's about. But what surprised me was the writing style. Like I said, it was very intelligent, very complex, very old English. I keep saying statesmanly because it sounds like a gentleman wrote it, about dark themes. But it also had a lot of humour, which I wasn't expecting so much. There was a few jokes. There was one in particular, I remember he said, if he will be Mr. Hyde, then I will be Mr. Seek. And I don't know why, that made me cackle. It was just so unexpected from the intelligence of this book to have such a punny joke. It just really made me laugh, and it made me happy that that was written in this classic. I just thought it was funny. So if you're a literature nerd and you know the line I'm talking about, you know. It was interestingly written. It was a lot more fun than other classics have been, but classics just aren't my thing. So any review I have of classics, you're gonna take with a truckload of salt because they're just not my thing. But I did enjoy the story. I thought the writing wasn't too bad. I enjoyed the humour, and I need to go back and reread it while paying more attention. I'm glad I read it and it was fun to listen to. The next book was one my dad gave to me. So he travels pre-COVID. So he lives on a longboat now in the summers, and then in the winters he goes and travels all around the world. Past few years he's been like going through Asia. Yeah, it's a big place, so it's taken him a fair few years. He's just a backpacker. He loves traveling in the winter and then coming back to live on his boat in the summer. And so he gave me The Feed by Nick Clark Windo. As you can tell by this, it's not my usual style. Obviously my books I tend to keep very beautiful and pristine, and this is not. That's because it's my dad's, and this has travelled all throughout Philippines. Was it Thailand? Maybe India. Who really knows where this book has been, what beaches this has sat on, which coffee stains this has gotten. My dad's a lot less precious with his books. He got back from one of his travels and said, hey, I read this interesting thrillery book. Do you want to read it? He doesn't like keeping physical books because he lives on a boat, so very limited space. So I was like, yeah, Dad, chuck it my way. It'll go in the library. I got to it this October because it was a thriller, and let me give you its vibe summary. Futuristic technology, apocalyptic, loneliness, suspicion, trust no one, possessions, small survival groups, abandoned cities, abduction, and a family just trying to survive the apocalypse of technology. So that was the vibe summary. You can skip to here if you don't want to hear a plot. But this book is about a world where we have the feed, which is essentially the internet times 10. So in this future, we we all have microchips in our brains. We connect to the feed, which is an endless source of information and connectivity. And it is frightening. You could message anyone with a thought. You have access to any information that you could possibly desire. In the beginning, there are these sections where you have the feed and it is a constant barrage of information. It was painful to read almost. You know your heart rate. You can do complex mathematical calculations within seconds. This ball, if I throw it, it's speed X time, and you just have constant knowledge coming in at you. And in this world, everyone is used to this, used to the connectivity of the feed. Their whole lives rely on this information, just not having to think about anything because all the information is there, until the feed goes down and people are starting to get possessed and they're murdering their friends and family. A few years later, it's an apocalyptic wasteland. There's very few people left. All the cities are abandoned. There's small camps of survivors just trying to keep an eye on each other, and they have to watch each other so that they don't turn, and if they do, you have to kill them. In this story, we follow this married couple who are searching for their daughter who gets taken, and they will chase to the ends of the earth to find her in this derelict world. At the beginning of this book, I hated it. For the first, I don't know, 50 or so pages, I thought it was weird and boring and confusing more than anything, and I was really irritated by it. The story did get better, and I'll go on to that, but let's start with the initial. This book had a very annoying writing style where it wanted everything to be mysterious, but that meant it didn't tell you any of the information you needed to understand the present, what the bloody hell was going on. And I get it, you need to save some mysteries, but this writing style was just, I don't have any information here, and therefore I don't care. I don't care about these characters because I don't know the setting. The beginning, this isn't a spoiler because it happens right at the beginning. The main character is traveling with this friend of his, and all of a sudden he murders him, and then he goes back to the camp and says to the others he was taken. The others are like, oh no, he was taken, and they're all sad and grieving. And I thought, okay, so our main character is like a secret murderer, and he's lied to his group about what happened, and when he killed him, when he's told him he's been abducted, so we have a secret murderer spreading lies. That wasn't what was happening at all. I figured out way too far into the story that by taken, oh, he's been taken, they didn't mean like abducted, they meant that he was overtaken in his mind. He had been possessed, and our main character saw the visual signs of this, and they all have this pact that if you see someone become possessed, you know they're going to go on a killing spree and you have to kill them before they can. So they're all watching each other while they sleep, so that if they see one of their friends or family members get turned, they know that they have to kill them. And that's that horrible dilemma of, oh god, you have to kill your family member because it's not them anymore. But the beginning didn't explain that properly. Either I'm just really dumb, or this book failed to convey that to me. It just said he was taken, and I thought that meant the main character was lying and there was an abduction thing. Didn't explain that. So I spent the beginning of the book under this really false impression of what was going on. The writing style was just, ooh, mysterious, and it wasn't telling you anything that was going on. No backstory to the past and what happened until really late in, so that I didn't understand what was happening. And that was really annoying to find out that I'd been working under this false impression a huge chunk of this book. That was really annoying, and the beginning was just slow, boring, and by trying to keep this big mystery alive, it didn't interest me in the story. However, we get to about a third, a half in, can't tell you exactly where. Once it starts to explain itself and it gives up on this pretense of, ooh, I wonder what happened. Once it actually bloody tells you the plot, it tells you about the feed and how they used to have this, and now that there's this possession thing and they watch each other, once it reveals that to you, the book gets much better. And the more the book goes on, it gets better and better because it gives up on this not telling you what's happening. So by the end, it was really good, tense, and I was enjoying it. Rocky start, but it did get more interesting. I definitely enjoyed the themes of the feed. Again, this is kind of a good and a bad thing. When you're reading the parts where they're connected to the feed, oh god, it's awful to read. But yeah, I think that was the point. So you're reading from the feed, it's like, oh, I messaged mum and this happened today. The weather is exactly blah blah degrees. Oh, I dropped something and it fell at blah blah speed per second and my heart rate is blah blah. You're reading this literal feed of information, and also the formatting of it. There was very few spaces. It was all just continuous. Most of the words were contracted together, not even with a hyphen, but there was just no space, so that you're reading it like really quickly, but also not, because you have to hiccup over that's one word where it should be two. And it was horrible to read. My eyes hurt. My brain was like, nope, this is not English. So it was awful to read those texts, but at the same time, I feel that was the idea. The idea of having this constant flow of information would be a horror story. The internet is amazing, and it's great that we live in the age where we have such information accessible to everybody. However, there's a line that's too much information. No one needs that much information in their head. What this story was trying to communicate was that if you're just given all the information, you can't think for yourself. We should, as humans, be able to think for ourselves. Yeah, it's horrible to read those parts, but also I liked the message of the feed and how much I hated it. I deleted Facebook off my phone, the app, a couple of years ago, and I've never regretted it. I go on Google Chrome and check it every now and then, but not having it as an app on your phone means you don't go on it, and you don't do the doom scroll where you forever are scrolling and you're not happy, you're not enjoying yourself, but it's addictive and you just scroll through. Facebook can be addictive. It's just not useful or entertaining or informative in any way. It's just noise. Deleting Facebook, the app off my phone, that was one of the best things I ever did. And that kind of idea reminds me of this. Constant access of information can be damaging. There was also a lot of other cool themes, the whole possession thing. It sowed so much suspicion and paranoia between the characters. How do you figure it out? Could you kill your own child if they turn? This book was filled with desperation and fear and people just killing each other. You know, shoot first, ask questions later. This whole society had completely gone from high intelligence, they have everything they ever need to know, to complete savages figuring out what the possession was, what was going on, why were they being possessed, what was happening, what happens when they are taken over, are they still in there? It was a really interesting plot. When you find out what's actually going on, it was a really interesting way of thinking about it, and it changes a lot. It got me thinking. I thought it was interesting. So it started off horrid, got to the end, it got a lot better and got more interesting. This book definitely gives me Among Us vibes. I know Among Us is super popular right now. I'm unashamedly obsessed with Among Us. If you like that vibe of, you know, everyone's suspicious of each other, one of you is an imposter kind of vibe, this book does that because of the possession thing. Just your family and friends suddenly murdering you behind your back, pretending they haven't, imposter style. If you like Among Us, this has got those kind of vibes. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I liked where it went, but because of the annoyingness of the beginning, it was fine. You might love this book, you might hate this book. I'm kind of have both feelings towards it. It was a very mixed feeling, conflicted, but I'm so glad that it got better. I got some great themes and thoughts out of it, because otherwise it would have been a slog. And the last book, this one I read over the week of Halloween. I had to have a spooky book especially for that week, so I chose my most ghostly paranormal book, and that was Unrest by M. Harrison. This one was really, really fun. The Vibe Summary. Contemporary thriller with ghosts and paranormal activity, a haunted boy who can see the dead, creepy, chilling, old-timey ghost stories, Victorian era possession, and otherworldly experiences. So skip to here if you don't want to hear the detailed thoughts. This book is about a boy called Elliot, who is a pretty normal 17-year-old fuckboy just going to college, until one day he's involved in a car accident and he is legally pronounced dead for 2 minutes. And during that time he had an out-of-body experience where he remembers watching the event, and ever since then, whenever he goes to sleep, he can see the dead and ghosts. He has these awful nightmares, or are they nightmares, of these ghosts coming to him. He's now up to a point where he's so tired because he's avoiding sleeping. Everyone's just feeling sorry for him and not believing what's happening to him is real. So to find out once and for all whether this is all made up in his head or whether he can really see these ghosts, he gets a job at this model village called Past Lives. This model village is like, you know, those school trips where you go to those model villages where they have the staff dress up as people from that era and they show you artifacts and everyone pretends they're from that time. It's like a museum but a village outside with buildings and streets. So yeah, he gets a job at one of these where there is a ton of ghost stories and they do ghost walks where sometimes the staff have to stay overnight. So he thinks, if I can stay overnight in this job and I can figure out if these ghosts are real, what to do and how to stop it, and finally get an answer to his ghostly problem. I really loved this book. It was so much fun. It was in a contemporary setting, but also it had that old-timey vibe because he's working in past lives. So there's very like Victorian Edwardian aspect to it, where you get all these ghost stories from the past, trying to figure out what's real, which ghost stories are just made up for like publicity, and which ones are actually real. He meets a lot of really interesting characters. There's also a present day mystery going on. There's this interesting, strange girl he meets who definitely has a secret. I really enjoyed this book. It was a lot of fun. I've not read a book quite like this. I was so scared for our main character by the end. A lot of the characters in this book were really unique and interesting. Ophelia, I think that's how you say her name. She was a very different character, and her uncle too. He was a very interesting character. Our main character, Elliot, he was very realistic in a way. He triggered me a few times because he was a 17-year-old boy. No offense, 17-year-old boys, but this one was a bit of a fuck boy. He didn't have the best thoughts towards women. A sprinkle of misogyny in there, just enough that I'm like, oh, you twat. This book was set in Britain, so that was fun. I like it when books are set in England because relatability for me, and it's not all American teenagers. There was this definite character arc with Elliot. So he started as quite just an idiot boy, not really caring about women too much, but he did grow, and I liked his character growth and arc a lot. It was very subtle, very nuanced. It wasn't an obvious theme in this book at all, but I appreciated that. So I didn't relate to that main character in that way, but I did relate to him in a lot of other ways. I loved the ghost stories. They were so interesting and trying to figure out which ones were real. It was so mysterious. Characters, you just wanted to know what their secrets were, and they definitely had secrets. And the ending, oh my god, I loved where it went. When you find out the mystery and everything comes together, it was so intense. This book was very paranormal. There was a lot of magical, mystical afterlife elements. It's a very, do you believe in ghosts? The answer is yes, although I'm not sure that's totally realistic. The rest of the book was very grounded, so it seemed very realistic. I was in for the ride. I thought those scenes were very descriptive, and it was beautifully written. The story was great, and I had the best time reading it. It was so tense, the ending. I didn't know what was going to happen. I loved finding out the mystery. I really enjoyed this one. This is another one that was up there for me this month with The Institute. I loved it, and it was the perfect Halloween read. It was slightly unusual, well written, and interesting. I breezed through this book super quick. I had so much fun with it. I highly recommend it. If that sounds good to you, and if you love intense, ghostly situations, I thought it was great. Give it a go. And that was all the books I read in October. I read a lot of spooky books. I enjoyed my spooky theme. I wish I'd read more spooky books in September, but you know, you can't always have what you want. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know down in the comments what your favourite read was this month, which one of my reads you think's the most interesting, or if you've read any of them and have any thoughts, because I would love to know what books you read, and out of those, which one intrigues you the most. Thanks so much for watching this video. Give it a like if you fancy. I did struggle through my sore throat for you, and I probably edited this monstrosity of a video. Wrap-ups are a bastard to edit. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all in my next video.